Adolf Hitler, a name synonymous with evil and destruction. His rise to power and the subsequent events that unfolded under his regime have left an indelible mark on history. Yet few can deny the man's charisma, his ability to manipulate, and his keen understanding of military strategy, at least in the early days. His speeches could captivate and mobilize masses, turning ordinary citizens into fervent followers. Hitler, a veteran of the First World War, rose to power fueled by a potent mix of nationalistic fervor and promises of restoring Germany to its former glory. The Treaty of Versailles had left Germany humiliated and economically crippled, and Hitler's rhetoric promised a return to greatness. His early military decisions reflected this ambition. He sought to overturn the post-World War I order and reclaim lost territories. The reoccupation of the Rhineland, the annexation of Austria, were bold moves that defied the Treaty of Versailles and showcased his willingness to challenge the status quo. The dismemberment of Czechoslovakia, a nation that had been created in the aftermath of World War I, further demonstrated his aggressive expansionist policies. Each of these bold moves was a gamble, a calculated risk that paid off, emboldening Hitler and his ambitions. His confidence grew with each success, and so did his audacity. Hitler's early successes were not solely due to his strategic brilliance. The geopolitical landscape of Europe at the time played a significant role. The Allies' policy of appeasement, their reluctance to confront Hitler directly, played right into his hands. The Munich Agreement, which allowed Germany to annex the Sudetenland, is a prime example of this appeasement. He skillfully exploited the weaknesses and divisions within Europe, maneuvering Germany into a position of unprecedented power. His ability to read and manipulate the political climate was unmatched. By 1939, Hitler had achieved what seemed impossible. Germany, still reeling from the humiliation of defeat in World War I, was once again a dominant force on the world stage. The nation was militarized and ready for further conquests. This early string of victories, however, would prove to be a double-edged sword. The successes fed into Hitler's grandiose vision and inflated his sense of invincibility. It fueled Hitler's belief in his own infallibility, in his destiny as the leader of a 1,000-year Reich. His propaganda machine worked tirelessly to maintain this image of an unstoppable leader. This dangerous cocktail of hubris and strategic miscalculation would lead to a series of catastrophic decisions, ultimately sealing the fate of Hitler and his Nazi regime. His overconfidence blinded him to the realities of prolonged warfare. The world was about to witness the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition and the terrible price of war. The initial triumphs would soon give way to a brutal and protracted conflict that would engulf the globe and leave millions dead. On June 22, 1941, the world watched in shock and awe as the seemingly invincible Nazi war machine rolled across the Soviet border. This marked the beginning of one of the most brutal and devastating campaigns of World War II. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, was arguably Hitler's most ambitious gamble. It was a massive military operation that involved millions of troops and thousands of tanks and aircraft. This bold move would ultimately prove to be his undoing. Hitler believed that the Soviet Union, a vast landmass with a supposedly weak military, would crumble quickly under the might of the Wehrmacht. He was confident that a swift victory would secure Germany's dominance in Europe. It was a fatal miscalculation. The sheer scale of the Soviet Union, its vast distances, and its unforgiving climate had been grossly underestimated by Hitler and his generals. The German forces were not prepared for the logistical challenges they would face. The vast expanse of the Soviet territory meant that supply lines were stretched to their limits, and the harsh weather conditions only exacerbated the situation. The Red Army, while initially caught off guard, proved to be a far more formidable opponent than anticipated. Soviet soldiers, driven by a fierce determination to defend their homeland, mounted a tenacious resistance. The German advance, initially swift and brutal, soon bogged down in the face of fierce resistance and the harsh Russian winter. The Wehrmacht, unprepared for the severe cold, suffered immense casualties. Logistics became a nightmare. with supply lines stretched thin and German troops ill-equipped for the brutal conditions. The freezing temperatures and deep snow made movement and resupply nearly impossible. The invasion of the Soviet Union was a strategic blunder of colossal proportions. It drained German resources and manpower, opening up a second front that the Nazis were ill-prepared to sustain. The Eastern Front became a quagmire, consuming vast amounts of German military resources and leading to a prolonged and bloody conflict. It also underestimated the resilience of the Soviet people, their willingness to fight to the death in defense of their homeland. The Soviet Union mobilized its entire population for the war effort, turning every man, woman and child into a soldier. This miscalculation would prove to be a turning point in the war, marking the beginning of the end for Hitler's dreams of European domination. The Eastern Front became a symbol of Nazi hubris and the resilience of the Soviet spirit, forever altering the course of history. Before the snows of a Russian winter swallowed Hitler's ambitions, another gamble, another miscalculation had already begun to deplete the resources of the Third Reich. This earlier misstep would set the stage for the eventual unraveling of Nazi Germany's grand plans. In the summer of 1940, following the swift and decisive conquest of France, Hitler turned his attention towards Great Britain. The fall of France had been a stunning victory, and the Nazi regime believed that Britain would soon follow. Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain, hinged on the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force gaining air superiority over the English Channel and southern England. Without control of the skies, any invasion force would be vulnerable to British air attacks. The Battle of Britain, a relentless and grueling aerial campaign, raged in the skies above Britain. Day after day, the Luftwaffe launched waves of bombers and fighters, seeking to destroy the Royal Air Force and pave the way for an invasion. The Luftwaffe, confident in its superior numbers and advanced aircraft, targeted British airfields, radar stations and cities, aiming to cripple Britain's defences and break the will of the British people. The bombings were intended to cause chaos and force Britain to surrender. However, the Luftwaffe had underestimated the tenacity and resilience of the Royal Air Force. The RAF, though outnumbered, fought with extraordinary courage and determination. The RAF, though outnumbered, possessed better aircraft such as the iconic Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane, and crucially the advantage of fighting on home turf. British pilots could return to base, refuel and re-engage quickly. The Battle of Britain ended in failure for Germany. Despite their relentless efforts, the Luftwaffe could not achieve the air superiority needed for Operation Sea Lion to proceed. The Luftwaffe suffered heavy losses, failing to achieve air superiority or break British morale. The resilience of the British people and the effectiveness of their air defences proved to be insurmountable obstacles. The planned invasion of Britain was postponed indefinitely. Hitler's grand strategy had been thwarted, and the focus of the war would soon shift to other fronts. The failure to defeat Britain in the air exposed the limitations of German military might and marked a significant turning point in the war. It was a clear indication that the Third Reich was not invincible. It also showcased the strategic miscalculation of Hitler, who had underestimated the resolve of the British people and the capabilities of their air force. This miscalculation would have far-reaching consequences for the remainder of the war.